Welcome to Mortgage Lending Mastery, the world's longest running podcast in the mortgage industry. I'm your host, Lady Jen Du Plessis, with over 4 decades of mortgage, real estate, and financial services experience, providing the knowledge you need to advance your mortgage practice quickly and efficiently. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mortgage Lending Mastery. I'm your host, Lady Jen Du Plessis. And with me today is, we've been friends for over 30 years.
Believe that? Wow.
It's sad, or it's glad.
Oh, it's
I'm
good.
glad,
Yeah,
right? It's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. But we've been friends for a really, really long time. And I've told you all can go back. We'll put some links in before. I remember interviewing you a long time ago and talking about how you were just so big to me, and you still are, but you're just so big to me. And I went out into the hall and we were all standing in line, right? And we were putting coins in our machine, because we had our pagers at that time. So we were putting coins in the telephone booth at the hotel and, picking up our messages and everything. And I had no one calling me. And so I got on the phone and I said to my husband, hey, pick up milk. Yeah, I can definitely help you with that. And diapers and diapers, and I remember that. And I tell that story all the time about how I wanted to be so wanted, right, in the business. And because I leveled myself up, which is what Mortgage Lending Mastery is all about, with your expertise and your guidance and your counsel, I was able to level myself up to the caliber that I did. So all to you. Thank you so much. You and some other people, Dave Stevens, dear friend who passed away, that was sad. But anyway, I'm just so happy to have you here today. And I will put your bio below. If somebody doesn't know you, that's crazy. You're crazy if you don't know Barry, but he is definitely an icon in the mortgage industry. But happy to have you.
It is so great to be with you. And look at you. Look at how amazing you are. And internationally, domestically, knighted, just so many great things. So
thank you.
What's even better about that is the help that you offer to others and helping to lift others up. So that's wonderful to see.
Thank you. Well, I think that isn't that what we have as a passion, is like we got to help people, right? And I think that's what's again, I'm going to talk about being a master. That's what a master does. That's what a elite business owner does, is say, I'm not going to skim the surface. I'm going to dig in and I'm going to be the best of the best. And this is what I really love about what you teach people, is knowing markets and not just being at the whim of, oh, did the feds meet yesterday and they lowered the federal funds right? Oh, did that happen yesterday? I didn't know. Or just understanding, being able to dissect instead of, oh gosh, I hope no one's doing this anymore. But if I had a crystal ball and I knew where rates are going, I'd be living on a beach. Please don't be doing that. Right? But this is how we discern for our clients and differentiate for ourselves. Yes. So let's talk about, I have so many questions for you. Do you want to talk about what happened yesterday, or do you want to wait?
Oh, we could talk about the Fed. Okay. Clearly, this is something that is very misunderstood. People don't get it. So first off, you hear people say, oh, the Fed cuts rates and mortgage rates tend to go up when the Fed cuts rates. It's just, you have to remember a few things. Markets are forward looking. So for example, let's go back in 2024 in September, the Fed cut rates. And after the Fed cut rates, mortgage rates stabilized for a bit and then they went up. So did mortgage rates go up after the Fed rate cut? Well, markets are forward looking. What people forget is that mortgage rates went from 6 3/4 to 6 1/8, down 5/8% in the couple of weeks before the Fed cut by 0.5%. So you already got it in advance. Now, why did mortgage rates stabilize and then go up? Well, it's because we got the jobs report for the month of September, released October 4th in 2024, and that appeared to be a blockbuster report causing mortgage rates to rise. So we have to understand that there's a lot of moving parts here. Now, we found out later that not even half of those jobs were actually created when they finally did the numbers. We know the BLS overstated them by quite a bit. So this time around, we see that the Fed cut rates on September 17th this year for the first time in a while. But before that, they telegraphed it to us on August 22nd when the Fed had their speech when Jerome Powell spoke at Jackson Hole, and he made it very clear that the Fed was going to cut by 25 basis points because of labor concerns. So we were at 4.32 on the 10-year. By the time the Fed actually cut rates, we're at 4.07. Guess what that is? That's 25 basis points, 0.25%. Fed cut 0.25% that day. So you kind of get it in advance. Now, since then, rates started to move a little bit lower. They got all the way down into the 390s. So the 396 we saw. So it went down even further still, but got a little derailed yesterday.
Yeah.
The Fed cut 25 basis points. That was good. And the Fed did something else that was good, was that they have a lot of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities on their balance sheet, $6.6 trillion worth. But that's down a lot from over $9 trillion, or almost $9 trillion, I should say. So they've been running off their balance sheet. So what they said is, we're going to keep our balance sheet at this level. The reason why they do that is because by draining too much liquidity, it can create crunches in liquidity. We saw it happen in 2019, and the Fed had to take emergency actions. So they felt that this was a level, they're seeing signs that they don't want to get into an emergency situation. So they stopped the runoff of the balance sheet. Now, normally that would be a good thing for us. And here's why. Because there's about 20 or $25 billion between mortgages and treasuries that, as they would stop the runoff, what does that mean? That means they have to keep the level the same. So as those principal payments come in from payoffs, the principal payment that people make, maturities, as that goes into the Fed's hands, instead of just letting the balance decline, what they're doing is they're reinvesting them. But here's the rub. They're reinvesting the mortgage proceeds, not in mortgage-backed securities, but in treasury bills. Now, a treasury bill means that there's a maturity of 1 year or less, very short term. So that's something that probably would be less help to 10-year treasuries and corresponding yields like mortgage rates, which tend to be somewhat following the path of a 10-year treasury. Well, the bond market didn't like that too much. Now, here's the thing on that. Treasury Secretary Bessent can help us there, and I think he will, because as the Treasury issues new Treasury securities, he could steer them towards what's called terming them down, meaning issue more of short-term maturities, because they'll be absorbed by the market. And by issuing less 10-year treasuries, well, then you can accomplish the same goal, because it leaves them to be a little bit more scarce, so you can have a little bit better price for them and a little bit lower yield. So I think that we can get through that. The bond market handled all those things pretty well. And it even handled something else. Kansas City Fed President Jeffrey Schmidt, he dissented, says, I didn't want any cut. That's a pretty bold move to dissent. So the market didn't love that either. And we also had a dissenter on the other side, Stephen Myron, who said he thinks we should have cut 50. But people already knew that. They knew that was his position. So it really wasn't a surprise. But the Jeffrey Schmidt one was. So rates got a little tiny bit worse based on that. But then came the hammer from Jerome Powell. Remember, markets are always forward looking. And it was pretty anticipated that we get another Fed rate cut on December 10th at the next Fed meeting. Well, he threw a lot of cold water on that and said that that monetary policy is not on a predetermined path. And he said that it is not a far gone conclusion for a rate cut December 10th. But then he came back and said, far from it.
Oh, so he's really going to hold off. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was immediately after that you start to see stocks sell off and bonds sell off. So this is why we had a little bit of an unusual reaction, even though the Fed cut rates, because the market's always looking ahead. As I said, the market looks before the Fed rate cut. So now without that, look, I don't think rates go much worse than this. I think we will gravitate down. And the reason for that, Jen, is because we have a lot of good things occurring.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That the labor market is not as strong as the Fed might think. I think you'll see vehicle sales come in with some actual indications of what's going on. Remember, September 30th, that electric vehicle credit of $7,500 went away. So after that, we're starting to see sales decline. I think you'll start to see indications that the auto sector will be a little softer. We're seeing some help on inflation. That inflation is coming down. Look, there's a lot of things going on. Another thing, Jen, is that if the employment market is already a little softer, You remember back in September, I'm sorry, in March, we had those
Yeah.
voluntary terminations.
Right, right.
The nature of those is that they had like 6 months severance. So you wouldn't really see that kind of come into being reflective in the unemployment rate or in initial claims until right about now,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
October, November.
Yeah.
Problem is that the government shut down, so we're not getting any data right now.
So right, we don't know. Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions. Make sure that I
So
get.
by the way, just to finish the thought, so when we do get the data, Jen, when
Yeah.
we do get it, I think it will be friendly to interest rates. So I do feel optimistic about that. One other thing that Powell said that, well, I'm interpreting this by reading between the lines, is that it's hard to make a decision. He said, without this data,
Mm-hmm.
government doesn't reopen, Jen, soon. We're not going to be able to get the collection for
Yeah.
data ahead of
Yeah.
the next Fed meeting. And
Until
what
there won't
Biden
be a change. Yeah, we know
will
there
not
won't
be a
be a
change.
change.
He will not cut rates December
Well,
10th.
every day that goes by, and I just heard on the news this morning that they're now expecting that this will go another 15 days into mid-November. So that doesn't give enough time. So
Terrible.
okay, I want to ask a couple of questions because now listen, as you're listening to what Barry has to say, okay, if all of this is kind of going over your head, that's your sign, right? That's your
Well,
sign that you
it
got to
should be. We're
get.
breaking it down in a nice, easy understanding.
Right, I know you are, but it does take some time to understand this and to really, and I've been a student of this for years and years because of you, right? Because of you. But I have some questions that I want to ask. Number one, I don't want to forget this. I want to ask about the Fed funds rate and the dots. Okay, I want to ask about that just on the side there.
Okay.
But I also want to talk about because you're talking about unemployment, right? And that you feel like, maybe when the numbers get adjusted, et cetera, it might be favorable to us. But today, Amazon announced 40, was it 14,000 jobs gone. UPS also said 14,000 jobs gone. Target's laying off 1,200 people. They had just a whole stream of people that were now going laid off. And of course, they had someone online or on the news who said, or they were asking the question, do you think this is AI? Because everybody's so afraid of this, right? Do you think this is AI? So I'm curious. I don't really care about AI because this is not a conversation about AI right now. But my question is, and you can obviously put your thoughts in there, but my question is, with this new data, on the other side of other comments where it could affect next month's unemployment, what thoughts might you have there?
So announced layoffs can take time because you don't know. You announce a layoff. When is the actual layoff? What is the severance
A
period?
window.
So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so there can be a period of time before you actually see it hit the numbers, but I think it will be impactful. Probably raise the unemployment rate by 1 or 2 tenths of a percent. Its current level is 4.3. I
Right.
think I think it'll get to 4.5 or 4.6, and then move higher in 2026. As far as these layoffs as a result of AI, it is clear that AI is moving very rapidly. Robotics are moving very rapidly, and you can replace jobs with this. So I don't think it's going to make the job situation any easier. I think, in fact, that this is something that will likely have more people have a more difficult time in finding work, being hired, especially on the junior positions where you can potentially use AI to replace people. This is just the nature of evolution. If it's a cost saving measure, it is not just AI, because you might think, okay, you might need AI to replace certain positions,
But
but
not
also
all.
robotics
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something that we've had automation robotics, but then when you also pair that with the AI and bring it together and you have robotics with AI, it truly can replace workers in certain areas.
Certain
So
areas, yeah.
I do think that people talk about, okay, there's a shrinking pool of labor, maybe some due to the deportations, all that stuff. And maybe that's true, but I think we have to think bigger and longer term. That this is something where I think individuals have to make themselves more valuable, and
Mm-hmm.
we have to think about this. I talk about this in the mortgage industry a lot, and I say that you have to understand, you want to use AI as a tool. And, Jen, people are a little immune to this because you and I were aware of this, where so many people say, well, technology will replace people like loan officers.
Mm-hmm.
And we never really saw that happen. But why is AI different? AI is different because it is more two-way. Before, it was just all upload, no feedback.
Mm-hmm.
AI is different. Now, Jen, I use AI so much.
So do I. I mean, it's my search engine now.
Right.
It's
Well,
just,
actually, a really good search engine might be
yeah,
Perplexity. I don't use Google anymore. I use
I
Perplexity.
don't either. Yeah.
And like if you use Chat GPT, which I talk to often, you can actually get a little fooled. Like I wind up saying things like, "Oh wow, thank you so much. That was so helpful." It means I have good manners, but it also means that I'm actually thinking that I'm talking to a person.
Yeah.
So think about this. What are things that you can do that AI can't? And AI uses large language models, which are based on history. But one of the things we can do is, as you said, Jen, you have to really, you said this is a sign, this is a call to really get into being well versed and well knowledgeable on your markets for real estate and valuations and where the overall market's going. What we have to think of ourselves as is not someone who originates loans, but someone who creates wealth, someone who manages
Yeah.
debt. And if
Always
that's the mindset, Jen, then
been.
what happens is that
Yeah.
we can do what AI can't do, and that's give forward guidance. And
Yes.
that's what we want to be able to distinguish and differentiate ourselves.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. It's that's so powerful, and I hope that you're listening, to what Barry's saying here again, because this has been my mission for years and years and years. Is I'm not going to be like everybody else. You're a commodity if you're like everybody else, and so you have to look at what areas of your practice need work, right? Where are the gaps? Where you don't have the knowledge about what's going on in the global market or in the national market or your local market, you have to be better at sales. You just have to be better at sales and helping people. I call it edu selling, right? But you have to be better at educating and selling your clients at the same time. You can't just be a rate quoter. And anyway, so I'm not going to get on a soapbox there, but because everybody knows I'm on that soapbox on this show all the time, is that this is leveling yourself up. It's promoting yourself and promoting yourself. Yeah, you're promoting your emotional EQ, your EQ, your emotional intelligence, and you're promoting yourself out in the market as someone who's unique, different, because now you're in the know. You're not a know-it-all. You don't know it all, but you're in the know, and there's value to that. I asked my clients yesterday on a coaching call, "Hey, the Fed's lowered rates today. What's going to happen?" I got all different answers, and I said, "Okay, we're going to have a session just on this." Right, next week we're going to have a session on this, because this is just really important piece of it. But thank you for sharing all of that. And I love AI. I call it a hybrid, right? It's AI, artificial intelligence, and then it's actual interaction, right? And we are required to do both pieces of it. But I love it. Yeah, my AI is called Gigi. So I always go ask Gigi a question. I think that's awesome. I want to talk about the Fed dots. For years and years, I've been a follower of the Fed dots and follower of something else called the fear and greed index. Can you tell us what your take is on this for people? Because I would be looking at this every day. I'd be looking at everything, not the fear and greed, but I'm looking at the stock markets just like you do, and the bonds and everything like you do. When I was in the business, right, I was looking at it every single day. For the average loan officer who doesn't have that skill set yet, what should they be looking at?
So the Fed dot plot. So what you have is you have 8 Fed meetings a year, typically about 6 weeks apart. Every other Fed meeting, they do something called a summary of economic projections, or an SEP. Within that SEP is what they call a dot plot. And the dot plot is in anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think that the Fed funds rate should be in the remainder of 2025, 2026,
Right.
2027, and then long term, where do you think the Fed funds rate would be? And you could kind of gauge and tell, even though it's anonymous, where many Fed members are.
Right.
And since we didn't get one this time, the last one we can look at is what we saw from the September 17th meeting, where we did receive a dot plot. We're going to get one on December 10th as well, which would be very
Right.
telling. But what we see is a tremendous amount of divisiveness amongst Fed members. And, we are in a very divided part of history here within our nation. We have,
Yes.
you know, politically, there's a huge divide. And
Mhm.
look no further than social media to see how divided we are in that area. It's always something, people don't say, don't talk politics and religion, things like that, because it can get something where people get all fired up about. But I don't recall a time in my lifetime where it has been even more so right now. And I do think social media has a lot to do with that. But then when we look at the Fed, it seems like the Fed's in the same category. Just
Yeah.
at the last Fed meeting, you
Yeah.
have a dissenter, and dissensions happen, but they're not that frequent, that says we should have cut by more, and a dissenter that says we should have not cut
Yeah.
at
Not
all.
cut it all. Yeah.
But I believe the Fed members, and I don't know if this is because of political party lines. I'm not sure. I can't
They're
say.
not supposed to be, right? They're
They're
not
not
supposed
supposed to be, but I believe
to.
that there's
Yeah.
some of that bleeds through, and maybe
Oh, yeah.
more than I'm even thinking.
Yeah.
But it seems like we have a very divided Fed, where
Hmm.
many of them are begrudging to have cuts, and some think that the Fed's policy right now, which is indeed restrictive, admittedly by the Fed and Jerome Powell that it's restricted, should not be as restrictive as it is. And the Fed has, it doesn't make sense what the Fed's doing, Jen. And just allow me to explain this. Okay. So when we look at the three places a Fed could be as far as their stance, they could have a stance that is accommodative. And accommodative means that they would like to spur on economic activity, which you'd like to see, but they don't want it to get too hot. Now, how do they
Right.
spur economic activity? If you make interest rates low,
Hmm.
then most of us buy things and we think about it in terms of monthly payment. Oh, wow, interest on it is so low, it becomes attractive. I can afford that car. I could afford that home. I could buy these appliances. I could do that. So it becomes a little bit more attractive. So people spend more. It spurs economic activity. If the Fed is restrictive, then they put interest rates at a higher level, which
Hmm.
does a couple of things. It makes it more expensive to borrow, so you think twice about it. Well, I don't really want to buy that because it's so expensive. I can't afford it, or it's just too costly. But also higher rates tell people, hey man, you know what? I could safely put money in savings and kind of hoard it away. If interest rates are very low, I'm not getting much in savings, might as well spend it.
Might
So
as well
so so
spend it.
so so
Yeah.
that's where accommodative and restrictive come into play.
Hmm.
Now, if the Fed is right in the middle, where they're not trying to influence either, that's called neutral. So
Hmm.
what the Fed would like to do is have a situation where it is neutral.
Hmm.
They have a hard time doing that. And here's where we are today. The Fed is restrictive. We
Hmm.
do that by taking the rate of inflation. We add something that's called R star to it, which has some artistic variance. And then when we do that, we say, okay, well, what is the neutral rate of where it should be? And right now, we're probably about a 0.5%, even with this latest cut, above neutral, about a 0.5% or so. So that means the Fed is intentionally being restrictive, intentionally wanting to slow the economy. Now, should they be wanting to do this? A lot of people worry about inflation. But Jerome Powell said, okay, the inflation today, the printed rate is 2.9% on something called personal consumption expenditure. And they're looking at the core, which strips out food and energy. The reason they strip
Right.
out food and energy because
Right.
they can't influence food prices because that's going to be governed a lot by weather. Energy, what if OPEC does this?
Regions, yada yada.
The,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Fed could hike rates, low rates. It's not going to affect these things. So I say, what can we impact and influence? That's the core rate. They want it to be a 2, it's a 2.9. So on the surface, people say, it's too high. But really, Jerome Powell himself said, A, he believes that we're not getting government data, but if we were, it would be 2.8. He said that twice in the
Hmm.
press conference. So let's say it's 2.8. Then he said that the tariffs, and we have been saying this, and Jerome Powell actually reiterated this, is that tariffs are really not inflation. Inflation is persistent, constant, up every year, every year. That's inflation. Tariffs is a one-time price adjustment, then it level sets. So it shows up as inflation one time, but you should be looking beyond that. It's not real inflation. It's a one-time price adjustment.
Yeah.
So, and that's, look, you might agree with tariffs, you might disagree with tariffs. That's neither here or there. They have pluses and minuses, certainly, but we think that Jerome Powell is able to kind of see through that. He said that might account for 4 to 5 tenths. So he says maybe really inflation is 2.3. And in his words, it's not that far from our targeted 2%.
Yeah. So hold. Yeah.
So why the heck are you so worried about inflation?
Yeah.
Why are you so?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's two other things, Jen, that are very important to consider. One is that the largest components in the inflation reports, CPI and PCE, is shelter, which is rents or owner's equivalent rent. Now, owner's
We do.
equivalent rent is very tricky, Jen, because owner's equivalent rent is just a survey question
Hmm.
where people who own homes are asked, and this is literally the question. It's one question, it's a survey. How much could you rent your home for today, unfurnished and without utilities?
Hmm.
Then maybe you can answer that question. Even though I do this all the time, I don't know if I can answer that question accurately. How is just an average person going to be that plugged into what they could rent their home for? They're
Hmm.
usually not. And to show you the cause of this, and what happens is that homeowners think that they can rent their home at a raise of 4% a year. Now,
Okay.
this methodology has been in place since 1985, 40 years. Today, we have other ways of measuring that that's better than asking a homeowner who may be an intelligent person, but not really up on this in
Right. They're
arena.
not looking at that on a daily
Of
basis.
course, you're right, Jen. So what could we use? Well, you could use apartment list. You could use Cotality. You could use Fannie Mae's data, which is excellent. You could use Zillow's data. There's a lot of data out there. And when you look at all the data, and some of it's new rent, some of it's renewals, some of it's single family, some of it's multi, you blend it all together and it's closer to 2%, maybe a little less than 2. Now that has a big difference. It shows that our inflation numbers are pretty much overstated to a high degree. And that means we're probably at 2% now. And then, Jen, there's one other thing that's important to note, and it's called portfolio management fees. This is the stupidest thing, Jen. And nobody really digs in like I do and looks at these things. Portfolio management fees, that's what we'll pay. Look, if you have your money in a mutual fund, if you have it with a broker dealer, and
Right. Your
they'll, they'll,
financial
they'll
advisor.
charge you. Let's say they charge you 1%. Now, Jen, if they charge you 1% this year and then 2% next year, clearly that's inflation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if they charge you 1% this year and 1% next year, however, if stocks are going up, you're paying more, but you're not paying more on a percentage basis. They consider that inflationary. And it's wrong because that's money I'm happy to pay. If
Yeah.
it goes up at the grocery store, I'm not too happy. But if
Right.
you're telling me my portfolio went up 40% and I'm paying you 1% of that, okay, that's
Right.
great, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But they consider that inflation, and that accounts for 0.3%. It's huge because stocks have gone up so much. So
Wow.
we're
Yeah.
getting numbers that the Fed does not understand how to look at.
Hmm.
And based upon that, we're getting a lot of Fed members thinking, oh, inflation's a problem. When the real problem, Jen, is that the labor market, you pointed it out with all these layoffs. We
Hmm.
talked about AI is going to make it worse. We talked about the fact that we haven't seen the results of the voluntary terminations of government workers from March hit the numbers yet. We are seeing job openings decline. We're seeing when people get let go, they're taking much longer collecting unemployment benefits. So it's
Or
harder to
they
find
can't
a job.
find a job. Yeah. Or they can't find a job. Yeah.
Got it, Chad. You're
Yeah,
exactly.
because the jobs aren't there because they were replaced by somebody else, right? Yeah, and that's
Or
always
there's, or more importantly, Jen, there's no openings for that job.
right.
You
That's
know?
what I'm saying. They're not those jobs are not being those positions aren't being replaced. You know, and this has been something
The positions aren't being created.
right,
That's the
right.
problem. You don't have the absorption.
So, and this goes all the way back to, you know, the turn of the century, right? When we had dot-com era and we started exploding into the Great Recession. They had the bubble, right? And there are so many people that are now in the industry for 15 years, in the mortgage industry for 15 years and didn't experience the bubble, right? Didn't experience that because we've passed that up. And that was the one thing that we used to say, and still that I coach real estate investors as well. I help novice investors start investing in real estate, and we watch TV, right? We watch TV and we watch these employment and PCE, right? You know, PCI and CPE. We watch everything. We watch everything. And I keep telling them, I say, but what's the unemployment rate? Because that's one of the key indicators
Sure
I look
is.
at.
Sure
That's
is.
what I'm looking at.
Yeah, that's
That
very
goes
important.
high, then there's going to be pressure. If it stays low, we're in good shape, you know. And 4 isn't bad. It's high, but it's not bad. I mean, 3.5 would be better, right? but that would make too much of a busy economy, and then prices would go back up again, for houses, and that would be a concern long haul, just so let me get your take on that then,
As far
because
as home prices, well, look, I know a lot of people look at home prices and they say, well, is it a problem if home prices rise? Let's remember that it was
not if someone can buy.
67% of the
Yeah.
country owns a home.
Yeah.
So um, I think 67% of people would probably be happy to see home values go up, right? So just think about that for a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
So now, does it make it less affordable for someone who is trying to purchase a home? Clearly, it does. But
Mhm.
of the remaining 33%, many of them aren't yet at a stage where they would be buying a home. Let's face it, the person who's 16 years old working hard at a fast food restaurant, or someone who's going to college and having a part-time job,
They're
they're
not
not yet
thinking.
at a stage where they're really a home buyer. So there
Right.
is a smaller but meaningful segment that sure would love to get homes more affordable.
Mhm.
To me, the answer is not home values coming down. To me, the answer is A, interest rates improving. So
Right.
hopefully we
Right.
could see that. B, a small increase in supply, which I think is important because that would help in certain areas, not all areas, but in some. And C, the one that's the hardest to deal with, but it helps, is time. Why is time important?
Mm.
Because as your income continues to increase over time, it kind of catches up. So if you have interest rates come
Yeah.
down and income's going up, the difference between the two becomes more attainable. And interest rates coming down also helps people say, hey, wait a minute, I know that renting seems a lot less expensive, but now that rates have come down, and maybe I get creative with looking at some adjustable rate mortgages now with the Fed cutting rates a little bit more, maybe I can get into the home ownership game. And Jen, it's
Right.
so important too, because, and I know you've been such a great advocate of this, but there's a lot of foolishness out there. You listen to people like Diana Olick, you listen to what's been said in the New York Times and many other places where they say, it's okay not to buy a home. Renting's cheaper. Renting's
Mhm.
cheaper. It's not cheaper, really, because here's why. The monthly payment initially could be cheaper, but that rent payment does go up over time. And a portion of your monthly mortgage payment, it's really not a payment, it's your own money, it's principal. So
Right.
over the first 2 or 3 years, what typically happens is you can actually see the payment becomes less expensive to own. Now, that's just one aspect. The other,
Yeah.
of course, is a tax benefit. But
Right.
the big one, Jen, is appreciation. And that's
Mhm.
where people create wealth. In fact, the net worth of a homeowner is 44 times that of a renter. It's
Yeah.
hard to become wealthy without owning real estate.
Without owning real estate, yeah.
It
And
really is.
I want to speak to one other point, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm going to ask for some parting thoughts here.
You got it.
But when you were just talking about the payment differential, et cetera, I think this is something that, as you're listening to us talking here today, you want to be running these numbers because we hear a lot, hey, the house appreciated 3%, right? Unemployment, right? So maybe you'll have to help me walk through this again because it's been a couple of years. But the how, hey, we have appreciation of 3%. So now the houses are this much more, and I only got a 2% increase in my income. Are you with me?
Yes.
Or more, it's
So
about rate. I can't remember how we used to do
no,
it.
so there's a couple of things to think
Yeah,
about
because
here.
we have to
So,
actually run the numbers.
so let's talk about what is so wonderful about home ownership. See, there's a cost to live somewhere.
Mhm.
So whether you buy a home and have a mortgage payment, or if you rent and have a rent payment, maybe the rent initially might be less expensive, but the payments eventually kind of even out to some degree.
Right.
So let's just assume for a minute there's a cost to live somewhere. So if you buy a home and let's just say you put 10% down, in Jen, let's use some very, very simple numbers so everybody could follow along. Let's just
Right.
hypothetically say the home's $100,000.
Right.
If you put 10% down, your investment, the amount of money you're investing, just as if you were investing in a stock or a business, is
Mhm.
10% of $100,000 or $10,000. So
Yeah.
10,000 is your investment.
Yes.
If the home price, it's $100,000, goes
Mhm.
up 3%,
To 103.
that's $3,000 profit, right?
Right. Yeah.
$3,000 profit on a $10,000 investment, Jen, that's 30% rate of return. That's why you create so much wealth in
Yeah.
real estate. Now, when it comes to figuring out you're raised. Now let's just say most people, and this is what the numbers show from both from both ADP, and then you look at the Atlanta Fed's wage tracker. What they're showing is, of course, some is more, some is less, but they're saying somewhere between 4 and 5% is what people are seeing in annual increases. So if we were to say, okay, 4 and 5%, but home values are going up at 3%, I'm only catching up a little. You're actually catching up more.
Right. That's my point.
Because you don't use 100% of your income for the mortgage payment.
That's
on a relative basis.
Yeah.
You have more that you're getting on your income compared to what the difference is in the mortgage payment. And if interest rates come down, well, that's how you catch up even quicker.
Right, right. And people need to understand that they need to run those numbers. And I remember showing that to so many of my clients, just so that they could understand, that differential, that 3% here is not the same as 3% there.
And one other point to make on the opportunity, and this is where everybody listening, just put your thinking caps on here for a second, because think about this. The way that we measure demand, any price is determined. You remember this in Economics 101, demand and supply, that intersection equals price. So the more demand, tighter supply, prices go up. The more supply, less demand, prices go down, right? So that's what causes this. Well, the reason why prices have been going up is because demand has been, to some extent, greater than supply in many areas, not all. It goes by zip code, but I'm going to go across the board nationally. So if in your neighborhood, you're saying, well, that's not the case. We understand that, but I can't go into the 4,400 zip codes and tell you what it's going to be. We're just going to say on a national level. So demand is measured by something called household formations. So when a household is formed, mom, dad, and a child live in a household. The child grows to a certain age. They move out. They formed a household. Same family, but now they have 2 households instead of 1. So that's a household formation. We've been averaging about 1.8 million a year for the past 5 years. Supply is determined not by somebody selling a home. Because if they sell a home, where are they going to live? They're not going to move into a tent. So they've got to occupy another place. So that's kind of a neutral.
Right, a wash. Yeah.
Where you really get supply is from builders for the most part. So builders had been putting up, the demand was 1.8, builders have been putting up about 1.6, 1.7. And that's why supply was kind of tight and prices were going up, because you had more demand than supply. Well, the demand suddenly in the last 10 months or so, Jen, I'm sure you're aware of this.
I'm seeing it.
It's really dropped where household.
When are they going to finish that neighborhood, for God's sake?
Well, you're seeing household formations decline.
Right.
And we don't have a fundamental change. People still want to get married. They still want to have kids. They want the backyard. They want garage. They want the work from home. They want whatever it is. They want them, but they're postponing it.
Yes.
And there's maybe a lot of reasons for that. Affordability, uncertainty, things of that nature are causing them to postpone this decision. Doesn't mean they're not going to make the decision. They're just postponing it. Builders have responded. And what builders have done is, instead of 1.6, 1.7 million homes being built, they've dropped it all the way down to right size it correctly to match the lower amount of formations. That's smart. But now let's think about it, Jen. What are those people that want to go either rent or buy a home and move out? What are they waiting for? They're waiting for rates to come down.
Or to not be laid off, right?
Right. Well, but think about the catalyst here. The catalyst here would be if rates come down. And if we're right, and we do believe rates come down, then what happens? Demand rises. And as demand rises, what will happen to supply? Supply, you can't blink and build a home. Builders will increase supply, but it will take them longer. That disparity of more demand and supply not yet catching up is an opportunity. That's why I say put your thinking cap on and see the future before it becomes obvious. If rates come down, you should be thinking about, when is an opportunity to buy a home? It's now. It's before rates come down, so that you can take advantage of that rise.
Yeah, and so many, and I want to get off track or anything, but so many loan officers wait for the rates to come down and then hope that the people call. And I always say, be ready for when the when happens.
True.
And your future is a series of nows.
True.
What you do now is going to depict your future, and be ready for when the when happens. Start talking to your clients. Have those conversations, because when they go down, guess who's going to call them first? The servicer. And we don't want to leave any money on the table, right? That's just a strategy. That's not economics.
We call that establishing a strike rate.
Yeah. I mean, that's
what you
it.
should do is you should contact your customer today.
Yeah.
Find out what rate it is that they would be willing to refinance at.
Yeah.
And the second it hits that, because these opportunities have been fleeting, you want to take advantage of that and not start searching for them. You should establish it.
Right. And you won't have time, because we all know when rates go down, they come back up 20 minutes later when it's a real great day, right? You won't have time to talk to everybody. Oh, you changed your job, and oh, you got a car, and oh, your credit did this. Do all that now. Do all that now. Do yourself a great service there. I love it. Thank you so much, Barry. Gosh, we could talk for hours. I could make this 2 episodes and go for another hour with you. But I'm not going to.
It's always good to be with you.
Yeah, it's always good to be here. Any parting quote or any parting strategy?
No, listen, I think that the opportunity that we just laid out is an important one, as well as establishing a strike rate is very important. So those are the things I think that we should do now. We can't control what we can't control, but things that are in our power to control is identifying opportunities and preparing for what we
not reacting. Yeah, and not reacting. A good year ahead of us?
I think so. I think 2026 will be a great year for the mortgage industry.
Will be yay.
Yeah, I think lower rates and more housing activity.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that will happen that will cause interest rates to be more favorable for us, and that will jumpstart a lot of things.
Where do we find you next? Where's your next? We're releasing this next week. We're making this podcast push. So where's your next speaking topic? We're talking, the end of October.
Oh my gosh, I do so many webinars, and
I know.
Just in the past month, I've been everywhere. LA a couple of times, Vegas, DC. And as a Fannie Mae board member, there's a lot that I'm trying to do to help the industry as well.
Right. So. I love that you're doing that. Yeah. Well, so we'll be watching you. We'll be following you. We'll put links below so everyone can catch up with you. And again, it was so wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for divulging and giving us all this wisdom that, as you're listening to this, heed this information. Listen to this again. Make sure it goes slow if you need to, so that you can dissect the numbers that Barry was giving us on a variety of different things, but make this something that is a priority for you moving forward.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll catch you next time on Mortgage Lending Mastery. Follow us. Make sure you're following this podcast, and hop on over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you'll find my other podcasts, plus my TV show, Business on the Vine. And then we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining Mortgage Lending Mastery. If you found value in today's conversation and would like to get support, simply go to supportfromjen.com. That's supportfromjen.com. Or reach out to me on social media. Keep watching and listening for more insider secrets, stories, strategies, and ideas to help you become a master in your business.